Digital Monday. Hard Talk starts now with host Denise Demming, and we are waiting Kaen, Nunez, Tesheira, and we got special guests in the personalities of Martin George and Raquel Matthews under the theme Are Our Children at Risk? Let me say good afternoon, Denise, and how are you? I'll leave you to introduce your guests.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much. I wonder where is Karen? Hopefully, she will join us pretty soon.
Yes, in a short.
Um, yes, today's topic is Are our children at risk? And we focus on the question that is a very important question because there has been some increases in the report of child abuse. It was now 4 to 5,000 annually. The Children's Authority, they continue to urge everyone to speak up when they witness acts of violence against their children. But maybe we need to go a little deeper than that. And when we were preparing for this, I was reminded of a quote by the late South African Nobel Prize winner Desmond Tutu, who said, there comes a point where we need to stop just pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in. And that made me think of, are our children at risk? And we keep having reports of children who've been abused. And maybe we need to just go deeper and figure out why is it this is happening. So welcome Martin, George, and Raquel Matthews. And one of the things I like to start the program with is asking people, tell us what inspired you to agree to come to this discussion. Can we have Raquel first?
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. What inspired me? I feel like I would like to be an agent of change. That's why I came back home to Trinidad and Tobago. I was trained abroad, but I came right back here because I felt like we needed me. We needed school psychologists. We needed somebody to start advocating for our children. Yes, we have people, but we need more. So any form, any platform, any way I could be a member of change, I jump at the opportunity because it's needed.
I love that idea. You're an agent of change. And you know, once you do that in Trinidad, you had to be prepared to take licks, huh?
Take real licks and people.
So Martin, what inspired you to agree to be with us today?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon.
I might get disconnected from you, huh? Just
Okay.
letting you know. I'm having a problem with my Wi-Fi.
Yeah, good afternoon, Trinidad and Tobago, and good afternoon to all your listeners on Power 102 FM. And thank you, Karen and Dennise, for having me here. All right, it is indeed a pleasure. What I would say is that certainly, while I love the aspect of our culture where we, like old talk and bacchanal and humor and rumor, there are times when we need to have serious discussions on serious issues. And these types of programs, I think, are the ideal platforms for persons to share and exchange views and ideas and to help to elevate the level of discourse in Trinidad and Tobago, where we can proactively search for solutions, discuss the options, and find answers which can definitely help to make Trinidad and Tobago a better place. So any such opportunity, once I have the time and the availability, I always volunteer, and I will continue to do so because I think this is all a necessary part of nation building.
That is so. Yes, Karen.
No. I'm jumping in a little because I don't know where you all had reached because I was fighting up and I hope I don't get dropped off. But if I do, it's not me, it's the Wi-Fi. It's so good to see all of you, Martin, Raquel, and of course, Dennise, my co-host. I don't know what you asked Raquel. I know she has a private practice, but I also know that she's very much social conscious and is on various social platforms. I did look you up. I could have called you, but I wanted to ask you, something that you did say in an earlier interview, which was trauma is trauma. And that was the headline in the article many, many years ago. But what hit me about it more than anything else was that it said that if you don't deal with the issues of the child, that child is going to grow up to be an adult, and that adult is going to carry that childhood trauma with him. And I think we're seeing it acted out in the level of crime that we're seeing in the country. So if I could just ask you as a, I know you
School
call it,
psychologist. She's a school psychologist.
I know she goes, that's what I was going to tell her, ask her. I was going to ask her, she calls herself a school psychologist, which of course is different, but of course she sees children.
I specialize in children, yes, and
Yes,
special education, which is
right.
two,
I
two
know that
sides
she
of it.
does. And I know she does with children who are experiencing difficulties and trauma and so on. So from that broader perspective, from school we could deal with everyday education, but from that broader perspective, if I could ask, just to bring in the issue of
Trauma.
what are the signs that a parent or a guardian or any person having any kind of proper access to a child, what are the signs that a child is experiencing that?
When we understand what trauma is, we naturally go to extreme things such as divorce, car accidents, etc. Trauma is anything that overwhelms a child's or any person's central nervous system. So that looks like is something where the child is sobbing uncontrollably, or sudden behavior changes. Could be very angry, irritable, withdrawing, isolating, stopping eating, stopping doing what they enjoy. It's in children, we look for behavior changes. If that's how they talk to us when they can't express themselves. And once what we call a trauma line, so everybody has a trauma line from birth till death, their experiences that if we don't deal with, we react. So let's say at 5 years old, I had an incident with a dog. A dog chased me. And if I never had a chance to deal with that, every time I see a dog, even though I could be 65 years old, I'm reacting like a 5-year-old child, probably scampering, running around. So if we understand that trauma is trauma, and if we don't deal with trauma, we don't talk about issues, and we're not open to dealing with these things, you're going to have a lot of adults, when they get into confrontations, doing what they did when they're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. And we're seeing that consistently now. Some days I don't want to go on social media. I don't want to see what I'm seeing happening in schools, because it's scary and it's very frightening, because these are, well, I don't want to sound old, but this is the future of my country coming up behind me. And what are we going to be doing? Fighting and brawling and recording? It's scary.
But what would you say is responsible for this upsurge?
I think it's, as you mentioned before in your intro about looking upstream. I think I love being a Trinidadian. I'm proud to be a Trini. I know we have high academia standards, but at some point we cannot only focus on academics. We're not focusing on the holistic child. And yes, some of us survived it. We got licks, we got, you sit down there till you get it done. But that's not the way the world is. The world is changing. We have technology happening. Brains are being developed to fire. Our neurons are firing faster and faster. So the impulse control and this, what we call the instant gratification is constant. I can pick up my phone and get information. We didn't have that. To tell your age, I didn't have that growing up. I had delayed gratification. And maybe cell phones came and I was like 15, 16, So it's a trifecta of things. But what it comes down for me, because the place where we are able to see children, all the children because they're mandated, supposed to be in school from at least 5 to 16, correct? It's school, and we're not meeting the needs. And I think it's at some point we're going to have to look at, are we just going to focus on curriculum? And I know I'm going to be shaking up some people here, even when I mention the thought of we have to start looking at if SEA is the best thing. It's like, are you crazy? What is wrong with you? It's worked for so long. And yes, it has worked. And we've produced amazing people. But what about the people that are amazing in other arts, other creative means? We're missing them. And we need to start looking at how can we invest in our students. We're not investing in our future right now. Hopefully I don't
All
get
right. I'm going to come back to that in a little while. But I
Yeah.
want to ask Martin something. Martin, what do you think is causing this uptick in the violence in schools? And not only violence in schools, but the abuse of children.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, in terms of the violence in schools, I think the children are reflecting possibly what they may see at home, what they may experience in their communities, what they are actually missing in terms of their all round development, in terms of the love, care, and nurturing that, maybe we might have been fortunate to have gotten, as part of our upbringing. Because if you teach a child violence, from small, then that's what they will act out. That's what they will know. If you understand me. If you teach a child loving and caring, then similarly, that's what they will be able to display. So, we really have to go back to the root of the family and the foundation and building block of the society, which is basically at the home. That's where you build a family, you build a community, you build a village, you build a nation. But if it is that foundation is not working, is not functioning, if it is that the parents themselves don't even know how to be parents, they themselves are sometimes in need of counseling and guidance and, teaching them how to behave properly as adults, then how could they instill proper values, virtues, ethics, morals in their children? So, I mean, it's easy for us to condemn and castigate the behavior we see sometimes in the school children, where, with these videos that circulate on social media. But the fact of the matter is, you need to really look at the parenting or the lack thereof that really goes to the root of it. Because I mean, the reality is, and it has nothing to do with poverty or where you come from or where you were born or where you live. I mean, I always use as an example, you look at somebody like LeBron James. I mean, he was born into very bad circumstances. Dr. Ben Carson, very humble, simple beginnings with a single mother, etc. So those things are not excuses to say that this is why you must continue to behave a certain way. But what guidance and what role models you have and what training and upbringing you get as a child, those are the things that help to set the stage and set your course for life. So therefore, even if you are in a situation where all your peers are deciding, well, look, they're going to go and rob somebody, you will know for yourself, no, that's not me. I am not going. And that's what we need to moral compass in our youths so that they will understand the sense of values which will help to make Trinidad and Tobago a better place.
Well, I was going to ask you, Martin, because you are, of course, a founder of Crime Stoppers. So you have been involved in a number of organizations that deal with social problems and social issues. And one of them, which I was very impressed with, actually. I mean, the list was so long, but so I stopped writing. But it did hit me that you are the founder of the Crime Stoppers. But what I find very ironic, really, is the number of pieces of legislation that we have in this country, which to a large extent reflect or mimic the United Nations Universal Rights of a Child, and impose sanctions on the parents or the guardians, and also put in place protective provisions for them. And they are, as you well know, that the Children's Authority.
Actually, Karen, I have a nice list. If you
You
want,
go
I
ahead,
can.
because I want you to ask you something before you give the list.
Yes.
And I'm asking the question because I would not want to come to a conclusion without hearing what if it is correct. When the minister of is it would have been minister that deals with in the office of the prime minister with a children's thing. Is it? She
That would be
said
Webster Roy,
Ayana
Minister
Webster.
Webster Roy.
she said that that incident in the home where they have these these homes where they send children, place children who are troubled or traumatized or whatever, place them. That she said that the incident involving the employee and the firing of the employee, that did not come under her responsibility. Although under the Children's Authority, she is the minister. The minister I think she's the minister responsible for the Children's Authority. I'm not sure. So could you tell me the legislation and if you could answer that?
Right, sure. And I mean, I'm just acknowledging Mr. McIntyre. I think I omitted to mention, his name in my initial salutation. Right. So in Trinidad and Tobago, we have several laws to protect children, and it's an excellent point Kaen is making here, because in other words, there's no short supply of legislation to protect children. So you ask yourself, why aren't these laws being implemented and used in a more rigorous and vigorous manner to police and protect our young persons and children? You have the Children's Act, which is chapter 4601 of the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. Right? Under section 4, they deal with prevention of cruelty to children. Under section 30, it outlines what is a person in a position of trust, because you have to understand that sometimes, okay, it may not be necessarily your biological mother or father in charge of the child all the time, but it could be a person in a position of trust, either auntie, uncle, right, somebody at a daycare center, a teacher in a school, a principal. So you have all these categories which would identify a person in a position of trust. You have section 31, which outlines the interpretation of the position of trust. 30 is the position of trust. 31 is the person of trust. 32 outlines the circumstances of a familial relationship. Then you have section 34, right? This is of the Children's Act, which gives the power of the court with respect to children who are victims. Then you have section 45, provision for the safety of children. And then section 50, which deals with the authority of the court to order that the person responsible for the child must appear when a report is made to the court. So you have several ways that you have protections. Then you have the Children's Authority Act, as you were mentioning, Kaen, right? Under section 22 of the Children's Authority Act, it sets up the circumstances where a child is in need of protection and the authority that the Children's Authority would have in that circumstance. Then you have section 25E, which sets up the circumstances where the court will issue an emergency protection order. So in other words, when it comes to children, you can go to the court and get an emergency protection order to remove a child from a circumstance of abuse or danger or harm. Then you also have the Sexual Offences Act, Chapter 1128 of the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, where Section 31 puts an obligation upon you as a person in a position of trust to report any suspected abuse of a minor. And this brings us back to that same scenario, Kaen and Dennise, with respect to that person from that home who reported that incident. Under the law, you have an obligation to report it. That's Section 31 of the Sexual Offences Act, Chapter 1128. So you cannot close a blind eye or pretend that you're not seeing what is happening or you don't know. You have an obligation under law to report it. Section 31(2) gives penalties for not reporting. So in other words, you as the person there at that home, you have a duty and a responsibility. And if you don't, you could be charged and face a criminal penalty. Then you have the Children's Community Residences, Foster Care and Nurseries Act, Chapter 4604. Where Section 10 deals with foster care regulations and the duty of foster parents to report any incident of a child being harmed. So again, you have that duty in a foster home or a care home or a children's community residence where you have a duty to report where a child is being harmed. So that's why I say that person who stood up and made a report publicly about this incident, they not only had a moral imperative to do so, but a
Legal.
legal duty to
Yeah.
do so.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons I think, and I want to come back to Raquel because he's given you a lot of laws. You could I mention also the Constitution,
Yes.
the Education Act. That's actually I didn't even know that under the Education Act they have this thing where if a child doesn't come to school for
Truancy.
school attendance officer who can report to the supervisor on a monthly basis the attendance of a child if a child is not coming to school, and if there's no school attendance officer, then it's supervisor. So they're supposed to know why the children are not coming to school. Tell me why many children are not coming to school. Your experience, all of this Education Act, Constitution, all the things that Martin George said. Then it says there's some failure if you have all this plethora of legislation, and yet we have a situation of a child's head being cut off. You have a situation of in Valsine where a child allegedly, I don't know what the circumstances were, but it was buried anyhow, that was for sure. Removed her body. And then you have these social media where you're seeing young children being castigated in public, much less behind closed doors. And the issue with giving the child Clorox, bleach. I mean, you have incidents upon incidents upon. So it's all of what we just said. What is the answer? Because the law is like something wrong if the law not working.
We lack resources. We do. We don't have. So typically, it would fall under social work to investigate these cases, and a social worker, if they're lucky, might have four schools, and then if there's an emergency, we don't have enough people. And I gather there was a freeze on hiring a few years ago. We don't have the resources to follow up to educate. If we had the proper resources, not just focusing on teachers and principal and vice principal, but realize we need social workers, guidance officers, school counselors, school psychologists. We need crisis responders. We don't have crisis responders. I'm a crisis responder, but I sit down in my office because nobody knows what a school psychologist does in Trinidad. We need more of me, not to flatter myself, but we need specialists who not only are the psychologists, understand the psychology side, but we also understand child development, we understand special education. So when you ask why aren't these students coming to school, it's very possible. Maybe these are young parents who might be suffering with a learning disorder, a mental illness, so maybe can't get out of bed, don't know how to get themselves help, and so the children are at home suffering, and then that's when we turn to the abuse. The different substance abuse happens. And then let's say I'm in Form 1, Form 2, I can't read and write, I'm just going through the system. Well, things look better on the outside. I want to make money, I want to look flashy. I mean, I personally don't connect with the Trinidad music. But if a Form 1 student who can't read and write, that might be something that sounds well as a lifestyle I could connect with. Now, don't get me wrong, I know people are like, well, when they see me, they obviously assume I'm privileged, but I grew up in Claxton Bay. I went to school in Penal Convent. It's not that I just stayed in a little bubble of maybe assuming that I was in a bubble of the West. I grew up all over the country. I go Miaro everywhere. So it's the same issue. We lack resources. One, we are not focusing on not just educating on academics, education on mental health, education on proper parenting, educating on when we come up, we see different changes in behavior. Is this a mental illness? Is it help out there? Half the time, I don't know. I have to Google, do we have this service in Trinidad? Do we have mental health clinics? Some clinics do in the regular regional health corporations, but not all. So what do we need to do for us to find these things out? It should be accessible to every single person. And I don't want to get anybody upset because I do know we have good teachers, we have good principals, we have good schools. But at what point do we say enough is enough? we have to do more, and we can't just say SEA, SEA, SEA. Let's drill, 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 and then we have children who can't critically think, and all they can do is repeat and regurgitate information.
But they're not even doing that very well, because I got some data, if you don't mind me just sharing that very quickly. And it isn't COVID only, not even the COVID, which we all know impacted the results. But I should have taken on the name of the gentleman, but I saw it in another article, so it confirms what he had been saying. He says that 5,306 students in 2022 scored less than 30% among 19,079. And then in 2020, well, looking at the scores between 2019 and 2023, and an average of 19,000 students. In 2019, 52% scored over 50%. 2020, 63%. 2021, 52%. Well, 2022 was 37%, and 2023 was 58%. But what they're saying is that the SEA, this focus on SEA is not good for all children. They said in the last exam, 2023, they said of the children who passed the test, 11,000, it was high enough, of 18,000 passed the test. So I guess they made over 50% or 50%. Only 400 of that, nearly 19,000 children scored over 90%, and over 2,500 scored below 30%. So there's something wrong with the SEA. Martin, Raquel.
Karen, I don't want us to talk about the SEA, because that is not where our focus is today. Our focus today is on the kind of abuse that our children are getting, and why has there been an uptick? And I want to ask Martin, I have a view that one of the problems is that there are no consequences for those actions. So you can abuse a child and there are very limited consequences. Martin, is that a fair statement by me?
The thing is, okay, here's part of the challenge. It's not that the laws do not provide for consequences, because there are several consequences, that are set out in the law. All right. So, like, even if you just look at Section 4 of the Children's Act, which is under prevention of cruelty to children, right? That provides penalties where it says a person who commits an offense under subsection 1 is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $5,000 and to imprisonment for 6 years, or on conviction and indictment to a fine of $50,000 or imprisonment for 10 years. So there are penalties in the law books. Here's where the real challenge is, Dennise and Karen and Raquel and Mr. McIntyre. The real challenge is in the evidentiary chain of getting a conviction. That is where you really have the challenge. First of all, even to lay a charge. Because you see, sometimes you may have circumstances where children are still either living with the person who is the abuser, or close to them, either for food, clothing, shelter, etc. Look at that scenario where a police officer was convicted not too long ago for not only abusing his own daughter, but then recording it and filming it. Thankfully the mother stood up in those circumstances, and she ensured that justice was done. But you have situations where sometimes even the mother is covering up, even though she knows the father is abusing the children sexually or otherwise.
Martin, can I ask Raquel to respond to that? What is
Sure.
it that will inspire, encourage? What will make a father abuse their daughter like that?
Typically, he would have been a victim of sexual abuse as well. He was more than likely is a victim, because it's a cycle, and that's what they learn and that's what they do. So unless somebody gets help or somebody intervenes to stop the cycle, it does continue, and that's why it happens so often in the safety of your home. It's very scary. It's a very scary thought when we realize we don't talk about these things. There's no there's no way safe to talk about it because you can't talk about it in schools. We don't really talk about it on radio too often. It's not like a casual conversation. So how can we educate? There's a lot of miseducation out there. And for a man to understand that what happened to you as a child was wrong, it's not your fault, and we need to put steps in place that this behavior, this meant that the brain wiring that has occurred, we can help and aid you and assist you. But if you don't speak, if you don't feel comfortable to ask for help, and Trinidadians, Trinbagonians, we are very prideful people. So until we find a safe space with resources to open up and allow people to recognize it's not going to be of ridicule. You're not going to be judged. We're here to just help you. We need to stop the cycle. And the cycle is not being stopped at all. We're just having younger ones having babies, and we're still not having any conversations about mental health, how to proper sexual health responsibility. Those things aren't very active constantly. It's I went to school in a convent. That we didn't have that talk.
I just say something up to Dennise. When she says that we're not here to talk about the SE, yes, we are here to talk about it, and I'll tell you why. Because many children, and I know, and I think David McIntyre himself told me when we had that discussion. I hope I'm not saying something that you wouldn't want me to have said. But when I said to him, I said, because I started hearing these stories of why children were not going to school. They were not going to school because although school is free, their parents are working for $2,000 a month, right? Because their hours have been cut. They're working for CPEP or whatever, one of those entities, or even whatever, and they are not getting, they can't even put food on the table properly. So they can't afford to buy school clothes for their children. They cannot afford to buy the school books for their children. They cannot afford the transportation for their children. And one example that David, if I hope he doesn't mind me giving, is he said that he knew these children right from his community, 5 of them, and all of a sudden he noticed they weren't going to school. Why weren't they not going to school? Because their mother could not afford to send them to school. I know a person came to me living in HGC house. She has 5 children. She does have a job, working as a company, but it's a job in the evening. And why are her children at home all the time? Her children at home all the time because she cannot afford the books and she cannot afford the transportation for 5 children to go to school. So when you say that we're not talking about SEA, we're talking about SEA because the SEA results are a direct consequence not only of child abuse in the sort of historic traditional concept that we think, but it is also neglect, child neglect. And I'm going to ask Martin then if he could say whose responsibility is it that you see in America they have school buses, these yellow school buses that pick up the children and take them to school. Parents cannot afford. Well, you might say they shouldn't have so many children, but they have them. Okay, and unfortunately, more among the poor, you tend to have a higher number.
All right, Karen has just been frozen there. So Martin, can you answer the question that I think she was asking a question about who's responsible and why is this happening?
Well, I didn't get the entirety of the question, so I'm not sure exactly what was the thrust and gravamen of it. I don't know if you are able to divine or discern it until she comes back. Raquel, are you able to assist? Because I knew where she was going, but I'm not sure what was the destination.
Yeah, I gather it's like who's responsible for ensuring, like, maybe I might be jumping the gun, but I'm assuming why is we don't have.
Don't use that word. Don't use that word. Jump in.
Why, Martin? What's wrong with saying jump in the gun?
But I'm not too sure who is responsible for school transport. That was the first example she gave.
Okay.
As far as I'm aware, I know it's private. I don't get involved. I'll wait for
maybe the idea was that she was trying to figure out in terms of who ultimately has the responsibility for ensuring that children are schooled. In other words, not just getting to school, but that they attend school regularly and that they, are there. But again, it comes back to the teachers will have a responsibility in that regard. The principals will have a responsibility in that regard, because if you notice this child is missing days and missing weeks and missing months, then you have to report it. You have to, call in Raquel and say, well, hey, listen, Raquel, you need to start talking to this child, talking to the parents, finding out what is happening, why is this child missing school so much. Then you would then need to maybe escalate it up to the Ministry of Education, because I think they also have a duty to ensure that they get involved and that they, seek the best interest of the child. Because remember, legislatively, the children are supposed to be educated. You are supposed to send your children to school. That is the law. It's not an option, it's not voluntary. It's mandatory in Trinidad and Tobago. You have to send the children to school. And a lot of people don't seem to understand that. They seem to think, well, this is my child and I could do, what I want, as if it's a loaf of bread. And well, if I want to cut the bread in half, or I want to cut it in quarter, or I want to just pull off chunks of it. This is a child, it's a human being. And we also have the protections of the United Nations Convention in respect of children, right? And the charter that the UN has set out in relation to children, because our country is actually a signatory to that convention, and we subscribe to it, and it has been incorporated and enshrined in our laws here in Trinidad and Tobago. So there are several areas where the UN has set out that we have to ensure that we, provide the best for our children in several respects. If you'll allow me just to talk about a few of the conventions on the rights of the child, right, as set out by the United Nations, right? You have the right to life, right to a name and nationality. Okay, if you recall, recently there was the incident with a citizen who had been the mother had gone to be one of these ISIS fighters, and the child was born there. And then when she brought the child back, there was this issue of whether the child could get Trinidad and Tobago citizenship. Right? The UN Convention covers that. You have the right to an identity, right to live with your parents once they are around, right? Right to freedom of expression and freedom to information, the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, right? Right to freedom of association, freedom of peaceful assembly, right to private life, right to access to information and material, right to protection from violence. So, I mean, the United Nations, they went through each and every detail and facet of a child's life, and they ensured that they put these protections in place. And we as a country, we are a signatory to these conventions, and therefore I think it's part of the public education thrust that is needed. And that's why Dennise and Kaen and Raquel and David, I keep emphasizing it's so important for programs like this to keep putting that message out there. We need to keep giving this type of good, solid education and information to people in the public, because people don't really know. As I say, some people think that, if I don't want to send my child to school, that's my business. No, it's not. It's the business of the state, and the state says you have to. End of story. And if you don't, you could be breaking the law. That's it.
And be fined. And be fined, I think, $75 for each day the child has to go. But then if you can't pay to send the child to school, how are you paying the fine? I mean, what I'm really asking is that there are two sides to this. And I wanted to know, where does the Raquel talk about resources is a major factor in dealing with, regardless of the type of child abuse you're dealing with. You need psychologists, you need counselors, the whole gamut, I think. And you probably need it for the adults who are the perpetrators themselves, So how do you find, how is the solution to be found? How are we going to, I came off for a while, so I didn't hear your answer, but how do we get a solution to this problem, Martin, Raquel? I mean, I really don't know.
I will probably not be very popular.
You say that, I like, you don't want to be,
I frankly would love, and I feel like right now we are And again, I know we have constraints, but our education system right now is we just ostriches, sticking our heads in the sand. We're just focusing on one thing, and we're forgetting the holistic child, the holistic human being. If we, even if it's a 10-year plan, let's do away with SE. Let's not just focus reading, writing, math. Let's ensure our students could read, could write, but also diversify our curriculum. Let's start diversifying. There's so much more out there. Let's start having parents coming in for classes. We need to spend some money. And I know people are like, Raquel, when I bring this up, I get like attacked all the time. But I believe we have enough schools that if they were attached to primary school, they can go straight into secondary. We don't have
the point Raquel is making is so valid. Let me tell you, last year I was in Norway and Finland for some time, and both countries, they've done away with exams for children at those levels. They have no exams. So in other words, they focus on so many other aspects of life and development rather than, just, the academic competition, because not everyone is built that way. There are lots of persons who are, artistic, who are even autistic, who are able to do things that we cannot do. And they're able to work out things and function in a different way. All right. Look, for instance, in Japan, do you know from small what they do? They let the children clean their classrooms. They let them understand that, look, they must wash up the dishes. They have to sweep the classes. But you know what? They do that as part of their development. They teach them how to plant gardens. As little children, you are planting the garden because they show you, well, hey, listen, how you think you're going to get food? You need to grow your food, So all of these things instill values and ethics and morals in the children, so that when they come out into the world, they are not the little monsters that we are breeding and creating here in Trinidad and Tobago. Because in other words, it's like you take a baby monster and you're just feeding him and you're just mining him and what else you expect? It will turn into a big monster.
How do you start that, though? That is
you started in what Raquel is saying, that we have to change the education system. So it's not just SEA, it is the entire system.
It's a long term, but we have to start investing in ourselves. We have to start opening up our class. So, for the example Martin gave with the autistic child.
Right.
Autistic children don't get to come into typical schools. They normally have to pay, and and we're missing students. It's a battle and a fight to figure out what school will actually take students. But imagine we have schools, we're supposed to be simple. This is tell you how we aren't thinking ahead or with universal design of being able and free for all. We have secondary schools or schools that are 2 stories. But if you have a student with a wheelchair, let's say they're just born with some cerebral palsy, they can't attend that school because how are they going to get upstairs? We don't have ramps. It bewilders me to think simple things like that are just overlooked. And this is where we have to really start looking. We have a solid foundation. We know we have good teachers because they teach those curriculums left, right, and we know they can do it. So let's start investing in the teachers that want to go into special ed. Let's start investing into the students that want to do social work, counseling, school psychologists. Even in the States, when I worked up there, we had community police or state police had an office and was there every day, and they had relationships with the community. So police wasn't just seen as these badgers coming in to cause harm. They were encouraging development with these students as well. But I don't know when we're going to start to see that. I think we love our academic stance where we win so many scholarships, and I know that's good for us, but I don't think that will change. We will still win our scholarships. We might even win more, because we might get the arts, the technology, whoever knows what else, the music.
Not just that. The thing is, Kaen, Dennise, and Raquel, and David, here's the thing. The world is changing at such a pace that we need to understand understand that the traditional professions that we would idolize and think of, like for instance, Karen is a successful lawyer, Dennise is a successful psychologist and stuff like that. But there are so many new and emerging trends that we need to understand. You have persons who are like on the internet who are being able to become like a web content creator, a web developer, an IT technician. These are areas that, listen, man, we can't begin to imagine somebody who might be good at AI technology. So there are so many other areas or aspects that are not limited just to the basic academic route that we would have traditionally thought to be, well, hey, yeah, man, you once you do this, you're good. I mean, look at, for instance, the legal profession. It's overcrowded in Trinidad and Tobago. The medical profession is overcrowded. You have so many young doctors. I mean, basically, like, scrunting, sorry to say, if you understand me. It's a reality. So therefore, we need to change that mindset. We need to make a quantum leap, and we need to call upon our leaders to start being the agents of that type of change, because we can talk about it, but we can't actualize it. We are not in government. I mean, although one of us was, but
So we can blame her, Martin.
I didn't say that. No. We're talking about the present reality.
I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Yes. One of the issues that is coming to my mind in this conversation is that we seem to have the answers, and we seem to focus on two things. We focus on the resources, and my opinion is that we have the resources. Just today's newspaper, there's an article about the Children's Authority and the fact that they have spent $14 million on Piparo, that place in Piparo where they will house 30 children. If you had invested that 14 million in developing people like Raquel, then maybe they would have a different impact. So you don't have to put 30 children who've been abused into that home. You may be able to find families that could take care of those children, because children in a family environment function much better than most of the times they function much better than children in a home. Any comments on that, Raquel?
I did miss half of that because everything froze. But I think I did get the gist of it. Yes, because it also plays, what I'll go with is there's less, what helps the brain develop and what the brain needs, especially as young children, is routine and structure. When they're placed in an environment like a nurturing family environment, that's what we get. We get that structure, we get that routine, we get the natural nurturing love, even though it may not be one of your own, but that's what eventually happens. The risk with these homes, unfortunately, again, goes back to we lack resources. So it's not people with the specialization, etc. And so they don't know how to effectively manage situations, or there's too much situations or issues occurring, and things happen that unfortunately are then causing those children to now be abused in the homes that they're placed in. It's a hot mess. Some days some days I wake up and I'm like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know where we're going with this. Some days I really don't know.
I want to ask a question. Excuse me, just let me interject here with a question. Like I told Karen, I live in an area where I witness things on an everyday basis. Now, question is, under the guise of abuse, there are some parents who I see for myself who are willing to do good or to set their children up for the future by all means necessary. But systematically, they don't have any kind of method of approach. They don't have the media or the medium to access that kind of assistance to help their children. Now, I know one in particular. She's sick. She minds 4 or 5 little boys. I mean, they're not little baby boys. They're getting into their teens and stuff now. But I'm asking, could abuse start by people being frustrated and running out of hope as to how they would like to have their children, and in the eventuality that they cannot do it they might be going all out, especially that woman who is sick, I try, I try my best to help out some of them, because there's one of them is my very favorite. So I talk to him all the time. But where the parents are concerned, or where guardians are concerned, I mean, look what happened in that entity in Cuba. I mean, how do we help people from abusing these children when they are themselves abused by the systems that are not assisting them to help their children? How we go about that, Martin and Raquel? How?
It's very loaded.
Every day, every day.
I mean, yes, of course. If you're frustrated and you literally feel you have no hope, at some point, what we call your frustration tolerance, there's certain levels of it. And if you reach your point that there's nothing more you have left to give, you turn to whatever you have learned as a child or whatever your instinct tells you, survival of the fittest, right? So it's fight, flight, or freeze, right? So if I have to fight, and that means I start to lambaste my children or verbally abuse them, it's unfortunate, of course, but it shows that our parents at their wits' end and how to help them. We have resources, don't get me wrong, but they actively have to seek out these resources. You can go to the Ministry of Community and Social Development, I believe. They're grants, but how much do you get? We're limited. We're very limited, and it's scary that mental health is just still something we shoo and hush and pretend these things don't, and then something big will happen and we're like, oh my God, and then we go, oh, okay, and we don't problem solve. But KFC could raise their prices of chicken and we get very angry. We have some distorted views.
Yeah, we do indeed. And David, in answer to your question, I mean, there are support systems in place. I mean, there are several, churches and religious bodies and religious institutions that offer support services, outreach services, and they try to give that type of support. But I mean, clearly, it's not enough. You have other groups like Families in Action. You have St. Vincent de Paul. You have Red Cross. You have lots of organizations. Serve All. They do quite a lot of good work in that regard. So we do have some institutions, but then again, we need, I think, to have some proper governmental structure whereby maybe we can harness the energies of all these NGOs and all these disparate entities to ensure that it's coalesced in one, positive direction, so that you don't have a duplication of resources, duplication of effort, duplication of, everything. So that way, this one off doing that, the next one off doing that. Instead, you ought to have like one central body whereby persons can come and well, okay, look, all right, so you need a job in training, for instance, your teenage son in either motor mechanic or electrical installation or whatever. All right, so therefore the serval person is here. They will help you to get him into the school, because remember, we've closed down all our trade schools. We closed down San Fernando Technical, we closed down John Donaldson, we closed down the trade school in Tobago, because we don't seem to focus on these things. But the point is, we do have entities, but we need to have that one central body to harness all of them, so that we create the synergies whereby, look, you have now the proper benefit being able to trickle down to the communities. And therefore, you also now need to hire more persons like Raquel, more persons like Dennise, and of course, more persons like Kaen, because you need to have your legal framework in order, and ensure that you now put this out in a rollout so that the public knows about it. It's accessible to everybody. And that is what governance is about. And that's why I keep saying we must not stop programs like this. We must not stop speaking about it. We must not stop talking about it. And we must not be afraid to call out our leaders to say, hey, listen, okay, yes, you all are doing something, but you're not doing enough. There's more you can do. These are the suggestions. These are the ideas. We are willing to help once you call upon us.
Well, two things, especially as you mentioned. Well, first, Dennise's point about how the home in Paparo that they're building, and that same article, I was very pleased to see that the head of the chairman of that children's authority, Roll Agard, said that they were going to take a new direction in towards the children, rather to be more like advocates for the children, have the lawyers be the first line of defense, and to work with the parents instead of and have a work towards prevention and work towards reintegration into families, because it says research has shown that the best thing, subject to, of course, circumstances which would not allow it, the best thing for a child is to be with family members. So he's already talking about a change in the mode, how the Children's Authority, which is the umbrella organization as far as I understand, because they're responsible for 33 children's homes, among other things. And it's good to hear them say that, and that was in today's article. The other thing that I wanted to say, and that supports what Martin is saying, and as lawyers, you know, the overarching thing which many people may not understand, parents may not understand, especially when they're fighting for custody over children. And those children are abused because they are made pawns in a fight between parents, and all kinds of allegations are made that are not true, or the children are put through all kinds of psychological damage. People have to remember, at the end of the day, unless the parents can come to a decision which both parties accept, and that's why mediation is very helpful as a mechanism, is that the judge is what they call the parens patriae. He is the father of the child. He will do what is in the best interest of the child, not what the parents want, not what the mother wants, not what the father wants, not even what the child wants. They listen to what the child, as older the child is, yes, they will listen to the counselor and the probation officer and so on. But at the end of the day, parents have to realize, I might hate that man or I might hate that woman because she's an alcoholic, or he's a drug addict, because she's have a set of man, or she's have a set of woman, or whatever the problem is in the family that broke down the family to the point that there's hatred between the parties. And the only thing they have left to fight each other with is the children, which are the pawn. And they have to remember that when they go to the family court and they think they're going without those arguments, your marriage or relationship broke down, the court is going to be the best father of those children and do what is in the best interest of the child, regardless of how the parents or guardians feel about each other. And I think people need to bear that in mind when they are having their fights over the children, making a child a pawn in their argument, because I'm sure Raquel can speak to that I am sure a lot of children suffer psychological harm being put in the middle between two parents fighting over custody.
Yes, for sure. And I get put in the middle too, because I am doing therapy, and one parent doesn't like what Auntie Raquel has to say, so then there's a stop therapy. So then it's just, we at a stagnant point. But it's a lot of manipulation, and the kids aren't stupid either. Kids that learn how to manipulate their parents and know when to say, well, mommy said this to rile up daddy, or tell that mommy, daddy said this. And it's just a very vicious cycle. And we seem to forget that at the end of the day, we're looking at children, we're working with children. We have lived our lives. We're trying to put forth the best life for them. But if we only want to be selfish and focus on ourselves, all hell is going to break loose. We're going to just let these younger ones, these lovely young minds that have so much potential, so much in a world with such advances in technology, just to do what? Be just there, doing what onto their own devices, left up to, if they want to be go sing a little song and put up guns. That's where it's going. I swear. Every time I go on TikTok, it's another Trinidadian holding up guns, singing on a TikTok, and I'm just like, what is happening? It's really sad when the parents forget that it's not always about them. And that's when I think the first line of education for parenting is to realize it's no longer about you. It's now about these children that you have now brought into this world, and you can't continue the same way. And if you're too selfish for that, then maybe don't have kids. Think about that.
And having had the child, maybe you need to rethink what my role is now.
Mm-hmm.
And there isn't a lot of conversation about that. What is your real role now that you've had a child?
Yeah.
You know, but I have in my head that one of our biggest problems is the absence of consequences for breaking the rules. Because if people were punished or had to pay because they broke the rules, other persons will look at it and say, but he did that. And that could bring down this aggression that we have, this approach that we have. We believe that we could do anything and nobody's all the laws, all the rules that Martin just talked about are brilliant. But the implementation to me is where the trigger is. That at the bottom of it, we do not implement. There are no consequences. So who cares? Who cares?
Could people who are observing on the outside like me? Now, I do a practical I play a practical role in it, because I told you at one time I tried is it watching the backs, if I can put it like that, of these 4 little boys. Now, there's one in particular who he comes and check me all the time. I talk to him all the time and stuff like that. But can people like me, unknowingly to the parent, seek some kind of assistance from one of these institutions that will probably visit them, to put some kind of what should I say, a sort of style that they can use to assist their children? Because I know there are some people who would not come out and say, well, I'm going to look for assistance from this government agency or entity. They just stuck there and hope that some manna will fall from heaven in that sense, and they will help their children. So if I'm observing this now and I realize, well, that parent or those guardians or whoever doesn't want to, they're probably shy, or they just feel like it won't work, who can I go to identify and say, well, okay, I'm going to this authority or this entity or whatever institution to have someone, let's say like Raquel, go visit these people. You know what I mean? I know you probably have to get permission from the people, but sometimes they're in a mindset that they don't want you to do that. They are not doing it, and if you do it, they might be upset. So I think if there is some sort of avenue where I can go and say, there are some people there, I am quite worried about them. I know they need assistance. They're afraid to come out, or they're shy, or they're just so much within themselves, or probably fretting with themselves because they didn't do well enough to help the child how they would like to. And these boys are talented. They are very talented. I see it in them. I know. I talk with them. So is there a way that I can, I think it's something out of line, but I feel like I should go to Raquel's institution or Mr. Martin's institution and say, listen, there's a family there. I need you guys to send somebody there just to meet them on a kind of social perspective and say, well, how things are going with you? Like I was told that you were going through this and going through that. Is that possible?
Well, I can speak on what I do. So I do a lot of pro bono work. So the school identifies the kids, right? Or if somebody tells them. And so then what I would do, I enter in through the school side of things, where the principal, while the child is under the principal's care, I can interact, etc., and then do what I need to do. If I have to evaluate that child, that's where we start typically with a psychoeducational evaluation. And then we can bring in the parents and be like, what's going on? This is what we need. So it's not almost an attack, which is typically what's happening. It's normally the fear of the unknown and just assuming we're going to say something is wrong with what they're doing. But more so, this is what we've done so far as a school. So now how can we come in as a team? I love to say the word team because it's not only me. It's every single person that works with that child is part of the team and gives me some form of information. That's how I've done in the past. I've literally gone into schools, volunteered on my time, and had social skills groups, work with students, and really tried at some point to find a way to then bring in the parents to educate. And it's more like a conversation rather than a meeting. But I can't say, but typically it is you do need permission to work with these students. But if the school is hosting the program, then it's the principal typically can make the decision if we leave, unless that law has changed.
But David, I think you could also, like pass information to the Ministry of Social Development, because they do have outreach officers who can go into communities and visit persons, call upon persons. But of course, as Raquel says, you still would need at some stage some kind of cooperation, unless there is some overt abuse of the children, right? But I sensed that you were disaggregating the issue a bit from just outright abuse to maybe not being able to care properly for the children, not being able to
That's right.
provide the
That's
proper
right.
opportunities for the children. So it's not that you, the parent, trying to do something bad, you're just not able to do something good. And
Yes.
you either too proud or too unaware of where you can seek help, and you are wondering, as a third party looking on the inside, how can you assist? I think that by bringing it to the attention of the Social Development Ministry, they should be able to have their officers go out and in a very gentle and supportive way, because you always have to be respectful of people and their situations,
Yes.
and you always have to approach it very politely and delicately to ensure that you don't come across in any overarching manner as if you are preaching down to them or talking down to them, or making them feel belittled in the circumstance. Because let me tell you, if we want to empower and uplift people, we have to start from the ground up. You can't start from the top down. You have to ensure that you go in there and you are able to empathize with them. You are able to get to understand them as human beings. Because let me tell you, sometimes, it's like, you're digging in the dirt, you're digging, and you see what looks like a rough old stone. But when you take your time and you polish that, you clean it, you wash it, you shave it off, and then you realize it's a diamond in the rough that you are actually dealing with, and there's so much talent, beauty, and potential within it. But we need to be able to have enough personnel in the Ministry of Social Development to go out there and spend that time, because you have to spend time with these people, because you can't just come and give them a hit and run or a one and done. You have to be able to go in there and let them feel that you are really there for them. Because they view you with suspicion, because they feel, well, who's you? You're coming to give us a handout, that kind of thing. Whereas what you really should be doing is giving them a hand up.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Karen, welcome back.
I am going to be off and on about 6 times for this show. It's amazing.
It's amazing. Last week, I was on and off with the same kind of thing. And it's something that triggers me, because we have a Ministry of Digitalization. But when I think of, yes, we do. We have a minister. His name is Hassel.
Unfortunate. But I'll give you a joke too. When I was in Ministry of Finance, my secretary name was Miss Cash. So there you go.
So Karen,
I hope she turned up for work every day. Otherwise, you'll say Cash is missing.
Very, very sweet. Very sweet. She actually retired when I was there, but I was so shocked when I got asked what her name was. She said Miss Cash. How ironic.
Someone has made a comment on our chat that without education, life will be very hard. Make sure your children are educated. And my response to that is that as a country, we have to review the education system. Yeah. There's too much of a focus on people who pass and those who are more academically inclined, and not enough focus on the persons who are technical or talented or creative. And that's the kind of thing that we need to transform, which I'm not seeing happening at all.
But can I just say, I know Raquel has to leave at 5:30 because she's, I know you keep looking.
Yes, one volunteer for something else.
One more child of our country, but that's okay. One at a time.
Thank you very much, Raquel.
When I to ask her, she said, well, I wouldn't say it anyway. I said, yes, of course. Because she couldn't say no. Anyhow, but thank you very much. But what I want to think that we need to do is reconstruct our idea of what is education. Because I think people who get an education, let's say in what you call drawing, they're able to do the is that architectural
Technical
drawing?
drawing. Technical
Technical
drawing.
drawing.
Or drafting.
That is a SE, not an SE. That is a CXC subject.
Yeah.
What about technical drawing? What about doing a course on mechanics? Because there's the theory. People go to college to do that in the States. Why can't you offer that as a course, as a I don't know if they offer it yet, but what I'm saying is that I think we need to revise our definition of what is education, and we can look at that as a smorgasbord of different categories of education. And you did mention, and I'll ask Racket because she has to leave just now. You did say, and I think Martin said this, we all said it, why haven't these changes happened? And part of the problem, in my view, and I had that view even from then when he talked about too many doctors, too many lawyers. Part of the problem is we have to have strategic thinking, meaning that you have to start from what does your nation need? What are the needs of your nation? And then, getting a child to do a degree in political science and history and literature, that's very good because you need teachers. But how many of them are going to get frustrated when they do a degree in literature and they'll have to do at least a PhD before, I don't even know what that will give them, a job at the university, maybe. What I'm trying to say is that we need to tailor our education in such a way that we don't produce too many doctors, we don't produce too many lawyers, we don't produce not enough people in the vocational areas, so that the needs of the country are met and the child themselves as an adult becomes satisfied because he or she is pursuing something that he or she loves and is being respected for and paid for. Raquel, because I know you're leaving just now.
No, I agree. We need I think, well, first of all, we need to start with infrastructure. We have to find ways that we can ensure that we have inclusive classrooms, which means even if you are a special ed student, you are still part of that school. You're not put and hidden away from society. When I talk like this, I don't think it's going to take a year. I think this is a 10-year minimum strategic change from infrastructure, investing in the teachers, the different types of teachers. We don't just want math, English, we want art, music, PE. What else is out there? Plenty things. I don't even know because I went from here. But at the end of the day, if we start to diversify and start exposing our students, because, okay, we have speech and language. I work in South predominantly. I think we have speech and language pathologists. That is necessary. It's a very overloaded system right now. The wait list, I think, out of the UE clinic might be till 2025 to get an appointment. We have 4 in South. 4 for the entire South. And it's just a lack of exposure, because in the perfect world, I would be in a school, the speech and language would be in the school, the occupational therapist. So when people are like, you come from the Caribbean and how did you even find this out? I was like, Google. I stumbled upon this area. So I think we also have to find a way that, when we have career days, we don't just stick with the basics, the teachers, the doctors, the lawyers, the services. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But we need to start having the psychologists, the writers, the graphic designers, the people that create movies, just to show that there is more out there. And maybe we can stop having that brain drain happening of the specialties like me, who get very frustrated and say, I'm fed up. I'm going back to where I know I can help children and ensure they get services, and let them come back home and we are here. But right now, the system for children is overloaded. It's really, really bad. And it's really scary. And I just keep begging every single person. I'm like, if you have a cousin, if you have a niece, if you have a nephew, tell them go into work with kids, psychology, special ed, because we are lacking. And until we get the teachers to teach that, we are stuck.
So your recommendation is we need to develop the strategy, and it may take us about 10 years.
10 years, for sure. You need to encourage. We need to re-infrastructure these schools to make sure that if I am in a wheelchair, I can get upstairs to the next classroom, basically. We need, I mean, it's going to also create jobs. If we look at it, if some students need one-on-one aids, right now they're just using OJTs, but that's a whole workforce that can be hired, and you could work with that student from the start of schooling to the very end if needed. We need nurses, I think, back in schools, because things happen and just going to the principal isn't always the best resource, and getting a little first aid kit. There's just so much that we can develop, but it has to start with infrastructure, making sure that we have the teachers that can work with the mainstream classroom, and then our special, or the inclusive classroom, the special ed students, and then allow them to be exposed, and then build and go upwards. But right now, all we care about is penmanship, reading, writing, and math. And the kids that can't read and write, and I see it, they just get parts of the system, and then they come to me, and I'm like, this child can't read. And that's why they're getting terrible grades, and that's why they have flinging things in the back of the classroom. So what happens when they go to Form 1? They still can't read, right?
But Raquel, I want to ask you before you leave us, what is a positive thought you'd want to leave us with?
Every day I work with special needs, I work with children, I work with parents, and I have seen, and this is what warms my heart, once parents know there is a way, they will sacrifice anything for their children. So once they realize there are services out there, there are people that are out there to help, that they are brave enough to go, because we are here. I am here. I am more than willing. And I love kids. I'm going to be here for them as long as they need me. And we will just one step at a child, one child at a time is one change that I can make in this world. And if I do it, if I can just make 100 changes, that's 100 children I've helped. And that's what I go every day when I wake up, one child at a time.
Tell me, Raquel, how do people connect with you and your team, as you say?
My team? Oh, everybody loves me. You don't realize that? No.
Raquel, oh my God. Don't let them know how I know you so well.
Contact you.
The only thing you didn't do is call me Auntie Karen.
Yeah, I would try really not to. And to be honest, I believe I'm a child at heart, but I guess this is radio, so people may not realize that I am a white girl with green eyes and blonde hair. So there is that initial she doesn't understand us.
No, that's not true.
But some people don't realize that. And always ask me where I'm from, but it's more so that I try to give my story of how I reached into psychology, explain where I've grown up from. Like, for example, my father's Guyanese. You will never believe that. But it's more so I connect with kids. I don't know if you all might have noticed there's a dog walking back and forth. I work with a therapy dog. And a lot of what I do is just, I tell them we're liming, we're chatting. That's why I get exposed to a lot of Trinidad music and TikToks.
How do they get in touch with you? He's asking.
Oh, so sorry. It's 7. You can call me or WhatsApp is best because I'm always working. 702 8386. That's my WhatsApp number.
Social media?
PFGM LTD on Instagram, and it's a very long-winded one, but it's Psychologist for the Growing Mind on Facebook. I know, it's real long. I didn't think that through.
I think you need to go and look back on that one.
It's established now, it's too late. Can't.
Oh, okay, excuse me. Sorry. All right.
Well, thank you very much, Raquel.
Okay, madam.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really did appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Same to you.
Bye. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. Bye.
Martin.
Yes, now we have
first we were seeing a picture. Now all I'm seeing is a black screen.
You're not seeing? Yeah, but I'm here.
I'm seeing him.
You're seeing it?
Yes, I'm seeing this picture. It's a still picture, but he's there with us.
All right. So maybe it's me and this digitization of this country.
So I can't see him either.
Okay, but let's go ahead with that. Martin, we've been talking about you've been talking about the legal side. You've also been talking about the structures and systems. If you had to just give some advice as to how we could begin to implement some of these laws, what would you say?
Well, the thing is, I think the first thing starts with public education. And that's why I think that shows like this, I commend yourself, Karen, and David for doing shows like this, because this is part of where it begins. First of all, people need to know and understand, because just a simple thing as what I mentioned, that some parents don't even realize that it's the law that you must send your children to school. They think that it's their decision and they could decide. No, you have to. The Education Act provides for that. So I think that is where it starts. And let me tell you, I will never give up hope on Trinidad and Tobago, because I think our people are so talented. They are so creative. We have so much potential in TNT, but it's a matter of guiding and harnessing that talent in the right way. And that's where leadership comes about. That's where good governance comes about, because that's the purpose of your government and your leaders. They're supposed to lead you in a direction. You look at how Singapore was transformed under Lee Kuan Yew. You recognize that it's leadership that caused Singapore. Singapore was a backwater, a corrupt, backwater place that was undeveloped. But the thing is, through good leadership and guidance, he was able, along with the help of others, to transform that place into where it is now, I think, the fourth, most vibrant financial center in the world. So the point is, we can still do it with Trinidad and Tobago. We can't despair, and we have to keep basically plugging that message and keeping the flame lit and keep on fighting the fight, because the price for freedom is eternal vigilance, and we have to remain vigilant to ensure that our children remain free from abuse, free from degradation, free from harm, and that they can now grow up into beautiful, blossoming young persons who can make a valid and solid contribution to Trinidad and Tobago. So that is the positive I see in all of this, and I would say keep on with these programs. And as I say, once I'm available, feel free to call upon me. I will try to always, come and see how I can play my part, small as it may be, in what we are doing here, which is the building of a nation, one block at a time.
So you look like you're the next leader boy. You sound like the next leader. Let me say something, and I'm just throwing out a thought, because actually I'd heard it said to me a few times, and I thought it had come from that particular person, and then I started reading about it, and I realized it was a very common recommendation. The idea that primary schools, they were talking about primary schools mainly. I don't know if they also secondary, but definitely the primary schools they were focusing on, I think, being run by denominational boards. Because, and the reasoning given, I'm not saying I think I just want to hear what your thoughts are, because I don't have an opinion, I haven't formed an opinion. It's just that the reasoning that they gave, or the rationale they give, is that consistently schools run by denominational boards, regardless of the religion that you're dealing with, whatever religion it is, tend to do better at, both at SEA.
And there goes Karen freezing again.
I think Karen froze.
Yes. In the meantime, Mr. George, I want to sneak this question in quickly.
Sure.
With the bad expose that you see in the media about these children homes and things, because I've been in the media a long time. I've been doing interviews and listening to interviews with hosts like Karen and Dr. Job and all of them. And there were instances where we heard bad news coming out of these homes. Tunapuna. Now the latest is the Cuva Institution.
St. Jude's. We had some stories of our stories in St. Jude's. Belmont.
Yes.
Belmont Children's Home.
Yeah. How does that affect the thinking of parents who are not really able? Like I'm happy you said it's not parents who are physically abusing these children, but parents who just are shy and don't want to come out, or they're too proud, like you said. How does it affect them? Should, in case they decide, well, okay, I'm not able, I'm going to take my children to these homes. But when they hear this kind of bad news, if you had the option, you mentioned Singapore, I'm happy you said that, because it took a will to make it that way. how would you have addressed, or how can you address systematic change or affect systematic change if given the opportunity where those instances I just mentioned are concerned?
Well, I mean, one could understand the reluctance and reticence of a parent who, hears these horror stories and then feels, well, look, there's no way, even though I'm struggling and I can't, properly provide for my child, I'm not going to expose my child to that risk, and that is quite understandable. But you see, it comes down to a question of we as a nation properly monitoring and policing our schools, our homes, our institutions. That is what it comes down to, David. Because let me tell you, the persons who are staffing these institutions is not that they are all perfect. Let's understand some of them may be victims of abuse themselves. If you
Yes.
understand me. So the
Yes.
point is some of them may be coming in there with their own baggage. So as much as you may try to screen and, weed out, the bad apples, you may still get some of them there who are bringing with them their own problems. So therefore, we have to ensure that we do that rigorous psychological testing and assessment. Send them by Dennise every month. Let them do a test. No, I'm serious.
No, I
Because the point
understand.
is, it's only by that's what I tell you. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance. We
So
have
I
to
got shut.
ensure-
I got cut off as.
Yes, Karen, we know you got cut off.
So I just want to know if he thought that was something to be considered at all. I
No,
do not have an opinion.
Karen, can you just hold a minute so you can ask him the question again, and Martin, continue with what you're talking about?
Yeah. So, so what I'm saying is that we really have to ensure that we as a nation put the systems in place to have that monitoring and oversight, because we can't assume that, look, just because you put a child there in one of these homes, that, okay, everything is honky-dory. No, you have to be checking to see who is guarding the guards.
Yes.
You have to be monitoring it that way. And if you don't do that, you are going to end up with the problems that we have here. So it's a multi-layered approach in terms of that oversight and that regulatory monitoring to ensure that you get the best for the children, because that is what is the goal at the end of the day. That is what you want to ensure.
I hear you.
So, Karen, what's the question you were going to ask Martin?
What the question I'd asked was, which I don't have a view one way or the other. Do you think that the denominational schools or board should be allowed to run the government schools at the primary level? Because just based on results alone, it seems that whether it is SCA or CXC, they seem, for some reason, regardless of the denominational board that you're talking about, they seem to get better results. So is there some value in that argument that some people seem to believe is part of the answer to our problems with the education?
I would tell you, from my assessment of it, okay, it's a matter of your structure and your systems that are in place. And we need to understand, for instance, in terms of the denominational schools, most of them, if you trace back the history, okay, you go back and see, well, okay, from whence did they come? And you recognize that there's been a long tradition passed down from year to year, generation to generation, in terms of how they do things, how they structure things, how they plan things. And that is what actually gives the foundation for their success. Whereas in a lot of the government-run schools, all right, you do not necessarily have that structure. And because you also have, the scenario where persons feel, well, hey, listen, I'm not accountable to anybody, or I'm not reporting to this one, or I could do what I want, that kind of thing, then that now creates even more looseness. And there isn't that cohesion or that coalescence around a central set of ideals or principles. because I mean, if you think back to it, Karen, you went to a prestige school, Dennise, you also, David, similarly, so the point is, you all understand that, look, there was a certain ethos in the school you went to, that, look, you knew, hey, listen, as a convent girl, you can't do that. Regardless of how much you might be tempted, you're a convent girl, or you're a bishop's girl, or David, or you may be a St. Mary's boy, or, a Fatima boy, if you understand me. So there was something there that gave you that sense of pride, that sense of belonging, that sense that, look, hey, better is expected of me. So therefore, even if you are in a situation where you might be tempted to do otherwise, you are able to self-regulate, because you could reach back and rely upon that sense of core values that has been instilled not just in you, but in those who went before you. From generation, you could trace back the history of the school, and that kind of thing. So in terms of the public schools, so to speak, if we want to call them that, all right, which are just under the aegis of the Ministry of Education, because they do not have that, what we need is a more rigorous structure and an implementation of systems. When you look at, for instance, the Teaching Service Commission, and how heavily bureaucratic they are in terms of appointing teachers, placing teachers, interviewing teachers. It taking years to interview a teacher, it taking years to appoint a teacher, it taking years to place a teacher. Worse yet, if you have to transfer, and worst of all, if you have to discipline a teacher. 5-6 years, a teacher on suspension, drawing salary while you waiting to discipline them. That really creates problems when you want to have a proper structure in place. And because there is no coalescing around a central, as I say, a central ethos that gives us that commonality. I mean, let me tell you, anywhere in the world I go, okay, if I meet a fellow St. Mary's student, it's like you have a bond. You say, hey, boy, yeah, boy, I was there, that kind of thing, and you view that person differently. They behave differently, because you come from a common thread.
And let me say something to that, Martin. The reason why I brought it up also was because I had been invited at one of the SDMS schools on 2 separate occasions to talk on a subject. And the principals of the school, or persons who were in the board of the school, I was asking them how they had done so well, because I know it was Lakshmi Girls at the time. I remember them going around, and years ago when I lived in the East, they would go around selling buy a brick, $25 for a brick to build, and they expanded the school until they got a 6th floor. And I asked them how they were able to do that. They said the past students want to come back, just like what you say in with the Concordat. Once you're a denominational school, whilst what you do get is you get the right to choose the students, the teachers. You get a right to choose that the teacher is a member of your own religion, and there is a sort of a loyalty built in to the teaching staff who have passed through the school and who want to see the school there. That is what they told me. And they said also, apart from that, they would also have regular meetings of the school in order to maintain its standards and so on. But a lot of it came from former students who became teachers in the school, and that sense of loyalty towards the school. So I think it's not only the student themselves, but I think it's also the teachers and the board itself that encourages us. I'm not saying I go for one or the other, because there are a lot of good government schools that are doing quite well, as we know they are. But it is also a fact that it is more common to see good performance among the government-assisted schools, the denominational schools.
But Karen, you see, the good performance among the government-assisted schools has to do with the brighter students go there. So if the brighter students are going there, which is why I didn't want us to have this conversation I think that the biggest issue that we ought to be addressing is the system, structures, and processes. And that is where I think our society has failed. We've totally collapsed, which is why we're having all the violence that we're having. So, for example, if a man feels he could beat his wife and the police will not lock him up for that, then he will continue.
You see, you know why I would disagree with you a little bit, Denise? Because when I was living in the East, and Lakshmi Girls was a school that went up to Form 5. In fact, somebody that I did law with had to leave that school in Form 5 and go to St. Joseph Convent in St. Joseph to do Form 6 because it did not have a Form 6 because nobody wanted their child. Most people did not want their child to go to Lakshmi Girls because Lakshmi Girls was not considered a prestige school and so on. So what I'm saying to you, that idea that is the brighter children, how come that school now is the other schools are still doing very well, but that school now has a Form 6? How did that happen?
So can we go back to what we are talking about, which is the violence?
All right, but folks, I have to beg my leave because I too have another appointment that I have to head out to. But just on that last point that Dennise made about the beating of the wife, to give you all this one. So I put this question to a man in cross-examination, and it's the kind of question that there's no good answer to. Tell me, sir, do you still beat your wife?
And Martin, you're saying there's no good answer to that
There's
question.
no good answer to that one. Have a good afternoon, everybody. Thanks
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So, Karen, there was a story a long time ago about a minister who talked about one slap in 18 years. His wife talked about one slap in 18 years. Does that? You don't remember that?
Vaguely.
Vaguely remember it. And to me, that is an
remember that. Oh, she got only one slap in 18 years.
Yes, she
only
very
got
lucky. In 18 years. So what she was in fact saying is, the violence is all right. You can beat me, it's all right. And that to me goes back to what Raquel was talking about.
Right.
That we have that once you start to have that cycle of abuse,
yes,
unless something intervenes to stop that cycle, it will continue to repeat itself. And your children will do it, and their children will do it, which to me means that if our system structures and processes are not implemented, then we are going to continue to have all of the violence that we're having and all of the abuse that we're having.
So what would be the system? Because I'm going to ask you as to have the last word on this, since we have no, seriously though, because you seem very invested in that concept. So I want to hear from you when you say that, what you have in mind in terms of dealing with the issue of our children being at risk and our children being, what can we do to better the situation, which will take a long time, yes, but apparently can be done. What would you recommend?
We need to strengthen the domestic violence desks at the police service so that when a woman goes there, or not just a woman, even a male goes there and says and complains that I'm a victim of violence, that is treated with respect. But my overall position is not that. It's not just for the domestic violence units, it is for our interaction with the police. And my experience is that my interaction with the TTPS is terrible. So until we transform our systems, structures, and processes, nothing is going to happen. And along with that, if the key performance indicators are not clear, then people will continue to do what they're doing.
And where would you want to see those, especially when you're dealing with the issue of dealing with the child abuse or child, if I don't want to use the word abuse, but how do you better the next generation of children? Where would you put
it has to start with the parents.
Okay.
So it has to start, for example, Karen, young women go to the maternity block and they're 18 and they have a child. What should happen is that is rape.
And no, 18 is not rape. 16, once you reach
Okay.
16, it's
That doesn't change what I'm saying.
statutory rape is under 16.
Okay, and so that, how many times have we heard anybody suffering the consequences of statutory rape? I know there's another part of that where if they're consensual and all of that, but
they can't consent to under 16.
Under
they
16,
cannot give consent.
Nobody reports, not nobody. That is reported. That is unlikely to be reported.
That's true.
So you have young women having a child, a 16-year-old to be pregnant.
Yeah.
There must be a lot that's behind that we need to be working with. Where are the social services going to see that 16-year-old to understand what is it has happened? How are you going to continue? I've done some work with a particular school, and I have met a young woman who is still in that secondary school, and she has 2 children already.
My Lord.
So we have, as a society, we have to put those systems and structures in place. We have to be able to approach these people both from a legal point of view, as well as from a psychosocial point of view, as well as to be able to just help them to function, help them to live. We're not doing that. Everything seems to be who you know. You know, I have that view. That is a contact place. If you have a contact, you will get what you want. If you don't have a contact, you're not getting it. So you have a lot of young people, young women who have children and they don't have the capacity to take care of those children. And until we deal with that, we are going to continue to see what we're having.
But I think one of the points that I think Raquel made, and I think in response to a question that David asked, where do you get the services? Because I think sometimes people, all the things that you're talking about, maybe those services are available. Maybe there are, I don't know, because I don't deal with that. So I don't know that are those services available and people just don't know, it's not advertised, or we not.
Karen, here's something. If those services are available, then people will tell each other. Word of mouth advertising is still the most effective way to get information around. And Martin talked about it. He said we need to have more public awareness of a number of things. But I'm saying if the social services had systems that worked, people would know. The conversations I have had with people is, yeah, you go by social services and they send you by somewhere else. You go by that other place and they send you by somewhere else. So we're not clear. Karen, we can't even do these things online. So our system structures and processes have just failed, and it has failed in every institution. I cannot think, and somebody's going to challenge me on this, but I cannot think of an institution where our system structures and processes are working.
Even at the police station.
Even at the police station.
I think they should include a public section of the police that they are not police, but they are there to deal with those instances of domestic violence and, young girls who get statutory rape, as you said. The policemen, they are not trained for that. And they look at it from a policeman or a policewoman points of view. But this is something that is very social, if you ask me. And I think there should be departments within the police service. They have, I hear them talk about a lot of different divisions of the police service, but all of them seem to me under police, like they come from the police academy, They're not well trained, like Martin said, about the quality of the staffers that will be there to accept these comments or complaints and work on them from that social aspect. Policemen, sometimes you go into a station and they're so rough that you could hardly talk to the sentry. It's a different atmosphere when you get there. You'll be all wind up to go to the police station. I'm going to complain about this. I'm going to make a report about this. And when you get there, they burst your bubble. So I
I think all of us could give stories like that.
Yes.
But there also are good stories too. There are good stories,
Karen, but our society at this stage is in crisis. And we have to first recognize that. I do not think that the leaders have recognized that we're in crisis. If you don't recognize it, then you won't even begin to try to reframe it.
Yeah.
So I think we're at a stage now where people are saying, just like what you said, those lovely people, no, man, there's not all bad. Some good things happening. Of course, some good things happen. Of course. But the majority of it is totally unacceptable. I am, however, quite inspired by a comment that was made today that the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago will be taking steps to move in the direction move more in the direction of prevention and reintegration of families rather than providing institutional care for children. That to me is a fantastic statement, is a fantastic approach. If they do that, then we're likely to have less of the issues in those 33 homes that the taxpayer funds. It's 33 homes. And just recently, a woman was talking about the home in Chaguanas and that she may have lost her job, as opposed to how can we prevent what is happening? How can we redefine our systems and structures so that they are more people-oriented, so that they focus a little more on the children who are being abused? Because if we do not intervene in that cycle of abuse, it will continue. They will continue to be abused, to accept the abuse. And when they have children, the same thing will happen. There has to be an intervention. And if there isn't an intervention, we're back to square one.
Dennise, there's a comment there from Albert Montano. Are you seeing it?
Yeah, the police service should have been fully computerized since Patrick Manning was the prime minister between 2002 and 2007. But he refused to do that, and that is since 2007. Albert, you're probably right. But come on, we're in 2024. We need to digitize. Our country talks about digitization, but it is not working. Just look at this program that we're on now. Last week, my internet was just giving trouble. This week, Karen's is giving trouble.
Yes.
If we can't even do these programs using the internet, then something is wrong. So this is not just Patrick Manning's fault. I'm not into that. I am into what can we do to transform our country. And digitization is something that we have to do to transform it. You can't even, you're trying to get me vexed. Albert, you're trying your best, but Albert, you're not going to get me vexed.
I'm on the same page with you too when you mentioned about the effects of the type of education systems we have. I think from primary school, we should really get rid of this SES stuff. And if you want to do a serious assessment of these children who are going into secondary schools, we should find out who's ready for the academic stuff and who is very ready for vocational stuff.
And that is what is being done abroad. England is now doing that, where people are going into different schools or different approaches or different classes because of what they are showing an interest in. And that is what we're supposed to do. But there are people who will lose money if we stop the CXC and so on.
Yes.
Because lessons in this country is expensive.
Of course.
So there are people who have an interest. Let's continue this, but it's not making sense. So the entire world has transformed their education system, and we have an opportunity to do so. I'm hoping that at some point, we will be able to transform our country. And Albert, back with us. The licensing of vehicles should have been charged to the North Americans, should have been changed, I suppose, to the North American system. So no one could make their own plates and the vehicles will match with their plates. You are so right.
Yes.
It's amazing that we're still at the stage where you could go around the corner and somebody will do your license for you. So, there's so much work to be done. And we have a lot of people who can help, but we have to transform the system through which we select people to support us and to do the things that are necessary. I keep saying that we have an absolutely beautiful country. What we need is just to get the thing right, get the right kind of leadership, and so that we get the people at the bottom to say, yes, that looks like a leader that I am willing to do whatever is necessary to transform my country.
I certainly agree with you.
And
We got
David,
to
I think we should.
Yeah.
I will call Karen and tell her.
Yeah. I think she will understand. We got to
Yes,
go. We
yes.
got the news all lined up.
So thank you very much. And we meet again next Monday for Hard Talk.
Yes, of course. It's been a fantastic showing today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All the best. Goodbye.
Same to you. That's it for today's edition of Hard Talk, where the topic was Are Our Children at Risk? Hosted by Dennise Demming and Kaen Nunez Tesheira with our special guest Martin George and Raquel Matthews. Come next Monday, we'll have another edition right here for you at Power 102 Digital.